Okay. This is the Utility Commission meeting of the City of Rollingwood for Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. Start with the roll call from my left.
Andrew Sisolai. Now it is. Andrew Zachary.
Clark Wilson.
Jonathan Miller.
Christopher Meekin.
Thank you. Do we have a place for public comments? Are there any citizens who wish to speak on anything? Okay, we'll go to the regular agenda. Item 2 on the agenda is the discussion and possible action on the minutes from the last meeting of November 19th. I think these were circulated by email. Are there any comments for corrections? So, motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
minutes are approved. Item 3, presentation and interviews of the firms responding to the request for proposals.
Clark, can we skip to 5?
I'm sorry?
Can we skip to 5?
Yeah, can we do number 5?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry you asked. Okay, to begin the agenda, we'll start with item 5, which was a carryover from last time, which was a utility appeal for 3218 Park Hills Drive, and the reason for delaying the consideration of this appeal was we did not understand all the details of the timeline, so our city administrator Amber has put together a timeline of events related to this water service at this address. So the summary that's presented on the screen here shows initiated customer paid for a deposit for a meter in August of 2019, August 12th, and there was no service provided for about a month, and then there was the customer tapped into the line on his own and received a citation for that. There was a work order to set a meter, and my understanding, and maybe you can clarify this, so there was, maybe you can explain further beyond what some of the sentences you have in your, Amber?
Sure. So I guess we set a meter but didn't turn the paperwork in to AWR, who does our billing for us, didn't put them on notice that this is the meter number that was at that location. So what AWR has said, so Public Works go out to read the meter, and apparently sometimes our crew just types in the last 3 numbers, and coincidentally it didn't seem that odd that that they had one meter number in their system and we were reading on another meter number. It didn't seem that odd for the last 3 numbers, so they could have matched, and so nobody questioned it until the customer came in and said, whoa, this bill's really high, and we got into sorting it out and saw that we failed on our part to turn in proper paperwork and report to AWR what the meter was. So there's definitely fault, I feel like, on the part of the city as far as this billing issue goes. I think we have it all straightened out because we did eventually set the 1-inch meter on November 14th, and we've got the meter number correct there. So what I did is kind of just laid out 4 options for you because I wasn't sure, what you would like to do. Since the city has some fault, and really there's no way to tell. We did get a report back on the meter number, let's see, this 4344, it was accurate and meets AWWA standards. But really there's just no way for us to tell because there wasn't accurate record keeping of the meters. So
there's just no starting read.
right.
So you don't know how much
We really,
was used.
So we have
We
the
really
starting
don't-
read from the wrong meter, and we're comparing it to a different meter, hence there was a
Right.
discrepancy, or it was showed many more gallons, but we don't know where to begin, ultimately.
exactly. So, error on the city. We did not properly record and track the meter that was installed. So, yeah, you have some options where you could split the consumption over the 2 months. That way they would be at a lesser tier.
Well,
You,
but that consumption is not valid,
right,
so.
I'm not recommending any of these. I just wanted to lay out every possible option. You could split the consumption with the customer. You could charge wholesale rates for the total consumption, or you could charge only water demand fee, where the customer's bill for consumption would be 0.
There's other options. I mean,
The demand
to
fee,
me, I think you need to just throw out that consumption volume altogether, because there's no justification for it. Right, there's no basis for saying they used that value. They should pay the meter fee because they had a meter. And then you could say 1,000 gallons, or,
so
because, they used some water,
the minimum fee is what, $20 a month or something?
where a 1-inch meter is $30.
30, so it would be,
But they didn't have the 1-inch meter until November 14th, so it would be, I think it's $20,
for 2 months.
right?
Plus the sewer fee?
Right. This is just looking at the total bill, the 3378. Or wait, that's just the consumption, and then the bill includes the sewer and the water demand.
There would,
I don't feel good discussing consumption at all if we don't have a start read and an end read that's correct.
Sure.
I
I mean,
just
like I
don't
said, we
feel-
could completely take off consumption.
So-
I just try to lay out 4 different options.
Thank you, but
Yeah.
just to start the discussion
Okay.
amongst all this, I don't feel good about starting with the consumption that is based off
Is
of
wrong.
2 different speedometers on 2 different cars.
I would agree with that. So my assessment would be there should be no water demand fee, because we don't know what it really was, and it could very well be 0 or some minimal value. So,
Well, the consumption, the demand fee would be the minimum every bill would pay. It's $20 a month.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fine. So I would make a motion that the demand fee be $20, and that's it,
For each of 2 months.
for each of 2 months.
Well, let's hear what's your thoughts?
I mean, we usually, that's the only reason for our concern was that we usually just paid about $300 to $400 a month for all these other houses that we're building.
Sir, can you go up to the microphone, please? It's really difficult to.
State your name.
My name is Josh Gonzalez, and I am the supervisor for JD Hunt Construction. So, our concern was that our other houses, we only pay from $300 to $400 on a water bill. We do use a lot of water, but only in certain sections of it. When we're doing the concrete, the only time we use that is just to kind of compress the base, and then when the concrete comes, I mean, the water's already added in the concrete, so we don't use water in that. Other than that, when we use water, painters wash brushes, rolls. When we do the stucco, that might be a higher consumption, but it's never in the thousands. Never have I ever seen a bill that comes up over $1,000.
And it shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and
We
that's the only concern. I mean, and if what I thought was weird was if we got the meter on the 14th, or when we were taking water, then that's a reading of 1 month, or 2 months, and that's $3,500. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's why I was just kind of. And that's the only thing.
Okay. And at this stage in your construction, you had some concrete poured and.
Well, we're done with the. We have 1 retaining wall left in the back, and then on the side, But like I said, the concrete's already gonna come mixed. We're not gonna use water right now. We're framing. There's no water being used right now. There hasn't been any water been used, you know.
But Amber, we know what meter's on there now, that meter is working, and we have an actual start number for whatever will be their next bill.
Yes.
Okay, so that there'll be an accurate count of their water bill moving forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion from Andrew Zachary that the bill would be reduced to the minimum, which is the water demand charge of $20 a month for that size meter for the 2 months.
Well, that looks like there was usage measured for October. There's 1,000 gallons.
So this is I want to make sure this is the right meter.
Yeah, the right
No,
November's
this is-
when the meter.
This is the meter,
This is the
that
wrong numbers.
AWR, right, AWR had record of. The meter we actually set started with a 3.
Right, so we don't have any, there's no,
There's just no good way to tell what
Correct, so
consumption.
unless we can accurately bill a customer, I don't feel good about billing the customer.
Okay, so,
Is that the same meter though? Did they read the meter in September and then read the same meter again in October?
I only see one read on there.
No, that's the history. The read is on the left-hand column at the very bottom. It says total gallons 1.
It would be $2.
well, it's a,
What are we arguing about?
$1,000.
$2.
so it's $20 plus 1,000 gallons is what,
Right, because this is showing the past due amount, right?
right?
Plus the new water bill, sewer, and et cetera. But we're only looking at the 3585, which is the carry forward of the old bill. Well, I'm in agreement as well. I just don't see how we can say we know what was used in any way whatsoever. So I'm okay seconding the motion
Okay,
to just pay the demand for those 2 months. I think we have a starting point right now that's getting billed. So
okay. So motion and second to reduce the bill to $20 a month for the, I guess, these months of September and October. Okay. Further discussion? All in favor?
I,
Okay, so your bill's reduced quite a bit.
Thank you for bringing this
Oh,
to our
quite a
attention,
bit,
we
yeah.
apologize.
No, I mean, I understand, but thank you for listening. So this would just get billed, I would get rebilled then?
Probably,
Or,
Yes, we'll
Just send it
apply
out.
it to the new bill that's coming out soon.
so then the total I would pay would be 40 for the 2 months?
Right.
Okay,
Right, on the water side.
okay, yeah. Alrighty, is there anything else we
I
need to?
think we're done.
Okay, well,
Right.
thank you for letting me go first this time.
All right, thank you.
But is that it then?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're
Thank
Alright,
you.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's alright. Thank you for letting me discuss it. Appreciate it.
Okay, so, to item 3, now presentations, interviews of the firms and responses related to the request for proposals for wastewater rates consultants. So we have representatives of the 2 companies here, so would you like to be first?
One at a time.
Yeah, I already spoke to them about that.
Okay, we have
Ms. Cook.
Yeah.
printed copies of the,
Can I mark this up? Do we need this back?
Yeah, you can mark it up.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure it wasn't something that the city was
It's
gonna.
all yours.
timeline on the,
Sure, when I got into it, I realized it was a lot more complicated. So I'm glad y'all took the time to consider it and it was an issue, so,
It happens. It's,
yeah, it does.
for all the ways you do it right, we appreciate it.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay,
Are we ready?
so please introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Nelisa Hedden. I'm with Nelisa Hedden Consulting, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and present the proposal I've assembled for the City of Rollingwood's consideration for a wastewater cost of service and rate design study. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on myself and my firm, but I really want to spend most of our time, all of that background is in that proposal you have in front of you. So I'd like to focus more on my approach to the project and how I'd like to be working with the City of Rollingwood, of working with you and coordinating. Obviously, I want to answer all of your questions. Feel free to interrupt as you want to, or we can do it at the end, however you're most comfortable as we proceed through the presentation. Very quickly, my firm is Nelisa Hedden Consulting. Was formed in 2014. I'm a management consulting firm specializing in working with water and wastewater utilities, specifically on financial issues. My main focus is cost of service and rate design studies. That's the bulk of what I do. That being said, personally, I have an MBA in finance and have been working in the water utility rate industry for over almost 20 years now. I have served as a past chair of the American Water Works Association Texas Chapter Rates and Charges Subcommittee. I've been working in rate analysis throughout Texas as well as parts of the Southwest. I have testified before the State Office of Administrative Hearings, otherwise known as SOA, on contested rate case proceedings, where we're looking at issues surrounding rates. I've also testified before the Texas State Legislature on rate issues. That being said, let's focus more on what I'd like to do and the approach I would take with working with the City of Rollingwood. Rate study basically consists of 4 steps. The first step is to develop what we call revenue requirements. Revenue requirements are essentially what kind of revenue we need to recover from your rates every year. We're proposing to do a 5-year plan. What I find is 5 years is a good middle ground. It allows you some ramp-up time to plan ahead, but yet if we go too far out, that crystal ball gets a little fuzzy. So we're proposing to do a 5-year period. That being said, though, if we have things come up, we're about to retire debt or issue debt or something in 6 or 7 years, we absolutely can look at that longer period of time as necessary. We work very closely with our clients. I come and sit down. We first start working with your staff. Sometimes we have committees or subcommittees or the utility commission. However you all want to work together, we can work through that to be as efficient, but also get as much input that you need to give us as possible. In developing the revenue requirements, we look at your operations and maintenance expenses. We'll look at your wholesale rates for the City of Austin. By doing that, we'll actually go sit down and talk to the City of Austin, find out what their projections look like to make sure that we're reflecting the most accurate information we can. We also look at your debt, as well as any future capital projects we have coming online. For capital projects, we plan through and work through, well, how are we going to pay for these things? And we put together a funding plan for you and work with you at what that might look like. From there, we go into steps 2 and 3, which are functionalizing costs and allocating costs to customers. Webster's dictionary will tell you that functionalization isn't a word, and every rate consultant in the world will tell you, well, we seem to think it is. So let me tell you what that means. Essentially, in the context of a wastewater utility, we're really looking at the functional nature of the costs, recognizing that our cost structure is impacted by a couple factors. The first factor is going to be the flows, how much volume of wastewater we're sending to the system. But the second cost impact is related to the strength of what we're sending to that system. It costs us differently to handle and ultimately the city of Austin treat stronger sewage than it does more diluted sewage. So we have to understand that. We look at your cost structure. We'll work with the city of Austin to understand their piece of that structure, and we identify what portion of costs are associated with the flows, as well as what portion are associated with the strength of the sewage. And then your customer costs. This is the cost of having billing system and customer service relationships, meter reading, all of those fundamentals that go into that cost structure. Then we allocate cost to customers based off of their pro rata share of those demands. Then we get into rate design. We work very closely with you to make sure the rate design achieves your specific policy issues and initiatives. We determine whether we have a flat fee for wastewater or if we're going to have a base charge and volumetric charge and what that might look like. We also work through, do we have a different fee for residential versus commercial, and how that might look as well. That being said, that's really the spreadsheet portion of the study. We produce lots of spreadsheets, and geeks like me love spreadsheets and get into them, but quite frankly, that's the science. But then we also have to talk about the art. The art when it comes to rates, in my opinion, is that if I give you a report at the end of the day, and you go, well, this is great, we're not using it, and you put it on a shelf, then I haven't done my job. Instead, I want to work closely with you to make sure that whatever we do achieves your goals and helps you get to where you need to go. That being said, it's a very dynamic process, and it's a client-directed process from the perspective of what do you need. I work with some clients where we meet at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and we're done. Other clients, we sit down and we work through committees, and we go through and we have much more interaction. It's really got to be client-driven. Because of that, I don't limit the number of meetings. I don't say, oh, I'm going to meet with you 3 times and that's it. I'm going to meet with you however often we have to meet to make sure we get things done and meet the needs of your community. So in doing that, we did propose and specify some preliminary meetings of working with you all as the Utility Commission and or with the City Council or a combination, whatever we have to do to have some clearly established goals and directions from you all to understand what are our policy issues, to provide public information and knowledge of what we're looking at. We want to make sure we clearly address what your concerns are, and then we start working directly with your staff. Your staff are the data keepers, and so I'll give them a list of data and information we need, and we'll work with them on that. In terms of the spreadsheets I referred to, typically I work through those spreadsheets with your staff in great detail and filter through what level of detail is most appropriate for you all as well as the City Council. We can do it however you all need to in terms of the level of detail. As we're going through, we can meet with you throughout the process, again, at the level of detail that you all feel is most appropriate. The other thing I wanted to point out is the working with you on running scenarios. There isn't one size fits all, and it's not just a single answer, as much as the analytical part of us wants it to be. We can run and work with you through scenarios. So some scenarios that I've run for other clients would be different levels of capital improvement plan funding. We have $10 million in needs. What if we fund $2 million, $3 million, $5 million? We can look through those things. What if scenarios? What if the city of Austin doubles their rates in the next 3 years? What if we can work through what those scenarios look like, and we can run those scenarios for you. The other scenarios we oftentimes will look at is, well, okay, what if we have the same rate for residential and commercial, or a scenario where we have different rates? What does that look like? What if we have a base charge and a volumetric charge versus a fixed fee? We can certainly run through those scenarios, and again, those are things we work with you to make sure we understand what your needs are and what's most appropriate. From there, once we finally get to a report and we issue a report and work with you in public presentations to walk everybody through it, The other thing I want to point out is that's not the end. I won't just go away and not take your phone calls anymore. But instead, I want to emphasize I'm here and available to work through things. I've had clients call and they're going, I don't know how to tell my billing company how to implement this change. No problem. I'll call them and we'll walk through it. We've had clients call 2 years from now and say, guess what? That capital project we thought was going to cost $3 million now costs $5 million. What do we do? That's fine. I'm here to help you and to guide you through those things. And again, that's part of the total cost, and I don't nickel and dime and say, well, I can run that scenario for an extra $1,000. I don't do that. Instead, it's working with you to coordinate, make sure that you get to where you need to go. That being said, I have, pardon the pun, you probably feel a little bit like you've just taken a drink from a fire hose, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I have a couple. Are you a sole practitioner?
I am. Yes, sir.
And the other one was, in the proposal, I have to find a plan. Yep. On your work plan, item 5, you mentioned that you would be in touch with the city of Austin to discuss their future projections.
Yes, sir.
Have you got any ideas of what their plans are?
Without talking to them, I don't. We
Okay.
make some phone calls and work with them to understand that. As their wholesale customer, they should entertain a meeting with us and allow us to get a clearer picture.
Okay. Okay, those are 2 of my questions at the moment.
Sure.
I think our water attorneys have a good understanding too of what Austin's intending to do. We'll
On
eventually
the waste treatment side as well as on the water supply
Yes.
side? Okay. And the other question I had is maximum fee capping. What is that?
Maximum fee capping. So there are several different ways to design a wastewater rate. Because we don't meter wastewater like we do water, we have to somehow figure out how we're going to bill customers. So some utilities will go and just bill everybody the same. Others, we estimate use. On the commercial side, oftentimes we say, well, whatever goes through your water meter, we're assuming comes back to us as sewer. And if it's not, you should have an irrigation meter. But on the residential side, we have the issue of, well, it's not practical to have every residential customer have an irrigation meter. So one way is to do winter averaging. Some communities have found that issues with that become, some customers still irrigate in the winter. And so they set some policies of, okay, we're going to cap if we're going to estimate your use, we're going to set it at a cap of 5,000 or 10,000 gallons, whatever the data tells us is a reasonable cap for the community. And so your bill will never exceed this amount.
Okay.
So again, those are all kind of policy issues we've sorted through.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So how do you determine strength?
Strength, great question. We start with lift stations and do sampling of lift stations to identify on the residential side. Hopefully, usually we find a couple lift stations that are just pulling residential sewage, and most of them. And so your operators should be able to very easily go and sample what's coming out of the lift station. Commercial customers, you can individually sample. To the extent to commercial customers, what you have out here, and sample what strength they're putting in, and you allocate costs based off of the sample data.
So BOD or?
BOD, TSS, and pneumonia. But we also look at, to determine exactly what we're sampling for, we look at basically what the treatment plant parameters are and what their costs are in terms of those 3 elements.
And do you assist as well or provide guidance on things like reserve funds and sinking funds for
Absolutely.
campaigns and things like that?
Absolutely, and that's actually part of that revenue requirement determination process. We will look at your reserve funds, coordinate with you to the extent you already have policies developed and you want those policies incorporated, we'll take that information. If you're looking for input, we can certainly provide input in terms of recommendations, industry best management practices. We also oftentimes will coordinate with your financial advisor and ask them about times coverage for your debt and other reserve requirements that they want to see for you. And so again, those are all parts of that revenue requirement determination.
Do you have ideas or thoughts about thinking ahead? This is a multi-part question, I'm trying to do it simply. What kind of reserve or capital should be allocated for upgrades or maintenance for future improvements?
Great question. So there are several parts of a reserve funding. The first part is going to be your operational reserve. For a city-owned utility, we look at it a little differently than a non-city-owned utility. A city-owned utility, because you have tax backing and other sources of revenues, we usually look at a 3-month time period for your operations and maintenance. Then for your reserve fund. That's just there to help you through the weather, quite frankly, fluctuations in revenue and your weather. The second component to that is, quite frankly, reserve funds for capital replacements. That's a little bit trickier because, quite frankly, getting there. Ideally, we like to see some capital replacement reserve money sitting aside so that you can cash fund some improvements and we're not always dipping into the debt well. The issue becomes there's not really a set standard on that because of the feasibility of getting there. What we find is oftentimes, okay, to be able to build that reserve up, we have to add quite a bit to the rates, and then you all get lots of people in here screaming and yelling, and we all go, well, maybe we won't do that. And so we have to kind of look at that. We start off by looking at the age of your infrastructure and your asset inventory to get a little bit of a picture of what that original cost is. And that's one of the things, again, on that revenue requirement issue is we go through and say, okay, this is the original cost of your infrastructure back in whatever year it was built. This is what your reserve funds are now. Where do we want to go with that reserve fund? Do we want to put a little bit aside? I've got some clients who just their annual depreciation expense, they call it a reserve fund contribution, and they actually add that into their rate structure to be able to cash fund those reserves. Those are the lucky clients who don't have a lot of debt. Other clients who have a lot of debt go, well, we don't want to have to charge so much to our customers because we're so debt laden. And so again, those are those policy things we work through on what to put in the number. The next component of that would be your debt reserves in terms of for your debt service. Do you have the dedicated reserves? Do you need additional reserves to cover that? And again, we work with your financial advisor to understand that and make sure we're meeting those thresholds.
Those numbers, is that analysis included in this proposal?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Great. No questions? Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. If any additional questions come up, please don't hesitate. Your staff know how to find me. Thank you. Thank you. And did you all want me to stick around?
You can head on home.
Okay. Well, thank you
We'll
so
be in
much.
touch.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
I couldn't see it. I was like, well, what's that say? I
There
took
we
a
go.
chance. I took a chance.
Okay.
Is there a, this keyboard can control that?
The right and left arrows will go forward and backwards.
Okay. We all set?
Yeah, please
Thank you
introduce
very
yourself.
much. Everybody, my name is Dan Jackson. I am Vice President of Wildan Financial Services, and I have with me Mr. Dan Lanning. He's a Senior Project Manager of the firm as well. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here to you tonight to talk about the needs and desires of a wastewater rate study and how Wildan could help you if we're privileged enough to be the one selected to do this project. We've got a brief presentation that we'd like to go along with the proposal that we submitted to you. We're going to start just by talking a little bit about Wildan as a company. Then we're going to talk about why it is beneficial for utilities to do these kind of studies, because many times councils and citizens don't understand why consultants need to come in and do these kind of projects and how it can be beneficial to do that. And we'll talk a little bit about the logistics of the project, and then of course we'll open it up for questions. Also, for your review, we've got a copy of a recent rate study that we did for one of your neighbors, not quite a neighbor, but the city of Selma, a little bit further down the road. And this is an example of a very similar type of product that we would be presenting and providing to you if again, we are fortunate enough to get this engagement. Let's talk a little bit about Wildan. Wildan is a publicly traded international corporation. We were founded in 1964, and we now have 900 employees with 4 divisions. The Financial Services Division, which is what we represent, is one of the 4, and it has over 1,200 clients around the United States. We are generally considered to be a nationwide leader in rate analysis and the development of rate-making methodology. I have 35 years experience in doing water and wastewater rate reviews. I have been doing it ever since I got my MBA from the University of Chicago in 1984. Dan, you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I actually started out working at the gas and electric company in Massachusetts, and then
Sir, if you could come to the microphone, please.
Sure.
I started working with a large Massachusetts gas and electric company, and then went to work for the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission started as a staff member and then became the assistant finance director. Mm-hmm. Had my own little firm for a while, and then went to work for a large engineering firm that through international, including doing rates, mostly for water and wastewater. They moved me out to Dallas, where, among other things, while I was working with AWWA, with their manuals, and the wastewater version, WEF, with their manuals on rate making, I also started the Texas AWWA rate committee, and was chairman for about 5 years. And then after that, I came to work for 3 other firms, and now I work with Dan, where I'm about the busiest I've been in my life.
And he's in a lot warmer weather, too. Finally, I started Economist.com in 1997, and Wildan actually acquired Economist.com in 2015, so now I'm a proud employee. But I can't quite let go, that's why I still wear this shirt. This is just a depiction of our client base. As you can see, we work all the way from the south of Florida, all the way up to the inside Strait of Alaska. We work in several foreign nations as well. We set the water and sewer rates for countries like Fiji and Samoa and Kiribati. Now, I know, as impressive as that is, I know that what you're primarily interested in is, what do we do here in Texas? Well, we have over 80 clients here in the state of Texas alone. We've done over 300 very similar rate studies in the state of Texas in the last 20 years, the majority of which in the last 5 to 7 years. And I'm going to kind of list all of our clients on the following pages, but I want to emphasize one thing very important. Every Texas project that we list here was worked on by either Mr. Lanning or myself. So we don't pack our presentations with quals of people that didn't do the work. I mean, all of the clients that we list here are clients that Mr. Lanning and I worked on. As you can see, we've worked for large cities, medium cities, small cities, all in every corner of the state. We've worked for many, many utility districts. We work all over the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we work for a lot of your neighbors here too. We've worked in Leander and in Liberty Hill. We worked in Brady and Alamo Heights. We've worked in Castroville, San Marcos, Schertz, Seguin. So as you can see, we have a very strong presence here in Central Texas. And of course, we work for a lot of special utility districts also. They've got a lot of needs too for our services. As I indicated, Mr. Lanning and I are the primary people on the project team. We have sort of a backup analyst too, Mr. Dennis Gorel, in case he would be needed at all for this project. We don't have him budgeted in the project, but of course we have a lot of additional resources. We're not a single shingle firm. We're a firm with a lot of resources and a lot of capability to assist you in your needs. So, whoops. So, what sets us apart? Why hire us? Why use Willdan as opposed to our competitor or anybody else here in the state of Texas? Well, I think the reasons are pretty solid. We're a large company, but we're basically a small firm. You know, Economist.com was a small firm of 7 people when it was acquired by Willdan in 2015, but we've never really lost the small firm concept. You know, the Plano office is very similar to what it was when it was acquired. You know, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so while it's great to have a big infrastructure behind you, we're still basically a small firm. I think that just by looking at the list of qualifications, I think our rate experience is unparalleled here in Texas. I don't think there's another firm in Texas that has the same level of qualifications or experience that we have. We've got, between Mr. Lanning and I, we have over 70 years of experience. I don't know if I should say that. That kind of lets us know how old we are. But I think what's most important is that we understand that rate making is not just a financial decision. Rate making is a social, community, and political decision, every bit as much as it is a financial one. You see, you try to run your operation like a business. You want the revenues from your rates to cover all the costs of doing business. But at the same time, you have a customer base that A, wants the best level of service capable, but B, doesn't want to pay any more than they have to. It's never an easy thing for a public official to raise water or sewer rates. It's probably one of the most difficult things that a public official could possibly do. But it's also something that's critical and important if you want to maintain a sound infrastructure. Infrastructure requires investment. Investment requires capital. Capital requires contributions from the ratepayers. And so we understand that. We understand that we're asking councils and commissions and cities to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. So we work with you to help structure rate plans that will get you the revenue you need while to the best extent possible minimizing the impact on the ratepayers. The outcome, we want it to be a successful rate plan. We're not just going to write a report, drop it on your desk, and walk away. We're going to be with you every step of the way to ensure that what you get is in line with what your needs are. The staple of our operation is an international rate model that we have developed over the course of the years. It's a really, really cool model. This is the dashboard page that is used to summarize all of the critical information in the rate model. Rate model itself has probably about 100 spreadsheets in it. Amazingly enough, a lot of people don't want to sift through 100 pages. They want to know what the bottom line is. This rate model allows you to do different scenarios and see instantaneously in real time what the impact of those different scenarios are going to be on your overall revenues and on your ratepayer monthly bills. It is something that we've adapted it for virtually every rate study we've ever done, and we would adapt it for the city of Rollingwood as well. Project timeline and cost, it's about a 3 to 4 month project between the initial data gathering and meetings and the final development of rates and public hearings. What are we proposing in terms of cost? We've proposed professional fees and expenses not to exceed $19,920. Now, I'd really like to address sort of the elephant in the room with regards to our proposal to you. We know that our competitor bid less than us. We know that we're the higher bidder. We know that we're the higher bidder by a pretty fair margin. We came up with our bid based on a combination of examining your scope of services and seeing what you wanted, seeing what you needed, and also our 70 years of experience doing rate studies. We know what it takes to do a study of this nature. We know the level of effort that's required. In our professional opinion, for a city your size, you're looking at about 120 to 140 hours of professional time between the time of doing the initial data gathering, the meetings with the staff, the development of the model, the meetings with the commission, the meetings with the city council, the writing of the report. There's an awful lot that needs to be done. And so, yeah, it takes time to do it. Our competitor's bid looks like she thinks that it's about a 30 to 40 hour project. In my professional opinion, I think it's a greater level of effort than that. And we want to do the right work for you. We want to bid it as low as possible, But at the same time, we have an obligation to do the due diligence that ensures that you're going to get the work product that you need and the results that you want. And so for that reason, we bid it at what we did. We think it's an appropriate price, and we think it's a reasonable price for the level of effort that's required. So on my last chart, why choose us? It would be a privilege to work for you. Choose us because we have a lot of experience doing this. We've done this for cities all over Texas, all over the United States, and all over the world. We're much more than just writing a written report for you. We're a partner. We're going to be with you every step of the way. We know that these kind of long-term financial plans can be controversial. We know that any rate increases are controversial. The average utility is raising its rates 5 to 6% every year. And so utilities all over the United States are wrestling with these issues, and they're all facing the same issue of ratepayers who don't really want to pay more than they absolutely have to. We've got a proven track record. We urge you to contact our references. I hope at least they'll say good things about us. If they don't, please let us know. And finally, we're a specialized firm. I mean, we're a financial firm. We're not an engineer. We're not, we don't do engineering work. We don't do bond sales. We completely concentrate on doing financial work and long-term rate plans for the city. We'd love the opportunity to work for you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
So as part of that process, we do work with our financial advisor as well to help sort out some of the details for capital expenditures, anticipated capital expenditures, reserve funds.
Absolutely, that is a core component of our rate studies. Who is your advisor? Is it Hilltop?
You know, actually, now that you have,
It's,
slips my mind.
slips my,
Estrada Hinojosa?
no.
Southwest Securities?
Gilly, it's, James and Jim, Gilly, here, let me
Okay.
Google it, oh, sorry.
Well, they're important. Debt plans and bond financing typically are the most critical input of any rate plan. And so it's important that whatever assumptions are made about the debt that you need to issue to do infrastructure replacement and system expansion is not only debt that you agree needs to be issued, but your bond advisor also can help structure the most appropriate principal and interest plan. That's critical, because that more than anything else is going to drive the rate plan. I mean,
It's U.S. Capital Advisors in
Okay.
Boston.
okay. Look, cost of everything goes up by 3% a year. So it's reasonable to assume that your operating costs are going to go up. But what really tends to spike rates on occasion is when you have to do a large bond issue. But you see, working with the bond advisor, we can structure these bond issues so that you can phase in the principal and interest payments, and that minimizes the need to do large rate increases. Ratepayers don't like large increases. They like gradual annual increases. Nobody likes to be surprised. So that is one of the key objectives of the rate plans that we develop for our client cities.
Yeah, outside of your wastewater fee that you have, that you pay your, I believe it's the person that operates your wastewater system, your highest one item is probably going to be debt service, because of whatever you need to borrow in order to finance the growth of the CIP.
Mm-hmm. But think of it this way, it's an investment in the future of your city. You know, if you issue a $10 million bond, that money is going directly into the streets and alleyways of the city. It is going to be used to construct assets that not only will be used by you, but they'll be used by your children, your grandchildren, maybe even your great-grandchildren. And so, if you explain it to the ratepayers in that way, that what we're doing is we're investing in the future of our city, I think it might get ratepayers to be a little more accepting of it. You know, I've done an awful lot of public hearings, and I've never had a ratepayer come up to me and say, "Hey, thanks, Dan, for raising my rates. I really appreciate it." But I have had people say to me, "I don't like it, but I understand why it needs to be done, and I understand why it's in the best interest of my city." And that's what our plan hopes, that's the response that we hope we can get from the ratepayers.
Proposition 218.
I'm sorry?
Proposition 218,
What are you referring to?
one of the key objectives, defensibility. recommendations must meet applicable requirements of the law, most notably Proposition 2.
That is some boilerplate language left over from a California proposal, so I apologize for that.
Was not familiar with that.
That, well, in California, they passed a law that basically says that if you're a utility that raises rates, you have to do a comprehensive analysis to show what the marginal impact will be on every ratepayer if you do that. It makes it so difficult to raise rates, and it's so, the rate studies are so complicated that it's very, very difficult to even implement. So I believe that's what we're referring to in that. And so it should have come out of the proposal, so I apologize for that.
Where did you find that?
On page 4.
I missed it.
So you also indicate that, in task 7, prepare and present draft final reports and conduct training for city staff. What
Right. If,
are you training?
it would be in the use of the model. So the rate model, we don't always turn the rate model over to clients. It depends on A, if they want it, and B, if they recognize that it is intellectual property of Wildan, and so therefore we would request that it not be shared with anybody outside the city. Our competitors would love to get their hands on that model. Believe me, they would. And so as long as it could be turned over in a way that does not trigger open records requests or anything like that, and it's not posted online, well, yeah, then we'd be happy to turn it over. And if you even have the desire to use it.
It's not only competitors, it's also the Public Utility staff.
Public Utility Commission staff, boy, they want
I
it
was
too.
gonna say, how do you keep that quiet if you get a rate challenge? Usually
Well,
you're supposed to turn over the model.
We have to. But fortunately, in Public Utility Commission challenges, there's a rule where the information is not allowed outside the immediate parties that are using it. And quite frankly, if there's a public utility challenge and one of our competitors is on the other side, then we're kind of between a rock and a hard place, to tell you the truth. But it just comes with the territory. It hasn't happened yet, fortunately.
In a city like Rollingwood that is not exclusively residential, but very highly residential, and not very big, can you explain how you would use demographic analysis?
Generally, the demographic analysis would be in regards to the amount of growth that you would anticipate having. And for Rollingwood, you're absolutely right, the growth would be residential.
We're landlocked. There's no place to grow.
Right.
So
And so if there is not growth, and if you do not anticipate a significant level of growth in the future, then that, of course, is a critical input to the rate model. Because remember, what we're doing is a 10-year forecast. And so we work for a lot of cities. Frisco, for example, is one of our clients. Frisco is the largest growing city in the United States. So the Frisco is going to be a very significantly different utility 10 years from now than it is today. Any decently prepared rate plan has to take that into consideration. You are a more stable city. And so demographics and growth are not going to be as critical an issue here. Because most of the costs of infrastructure are unfortunately going to have to be borne by your existing ratepayers. At the same time, the other component of the demographic analysis is that we generally do a rate comparison. We look at a sample of surrounding cities. What do they charge for wastewater service? Because it's a question that's always asked. It's in fact one of the first questions that's asked at any council meeting. It's not always an accurate or reliable or reasonable comparison to make, because 30 to 40% of utilities in the United States right now charge rates that don't cover their costs. So just because a neighboring utility's wastewater rate is lower than yours, that doesn't necessarily mean they're more efficient or anything like that. It might mean that they've decided to subsidize their wastewater rates. Also, you know, Texas is a pretty big state, and the cost of service is going to be significantly different in different parts of the state. So it's not always a fair comparison, but unfortunately it's something that's always asked. So it is a question that we prepare for and address during the course of these studies.
Questions?
None for me. Thank you for preparing this proposal and speaking to us.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, City of Selma adopted the rate plan. That was pretty controversial, but they did it.
They did.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
you.
Safe travels.
So we're on to agenda item 4, which is to now discuss and possibly act on recommendations to the city council regarding selection of one of these consultants. Maybe as a starting point, do we have a tally of our scoring that did anybody else send in one
I
besides
did
me?
not.
We received one, so,
That-
and also, I apologize for the, scoring 110 possible points.
Well,
of
whatever, I
possible
mean, it's
points,
sort of
but-
relative ranking is the
Right.
important thing, okay?
So,
So, did anybody else think about it?
Yes.
Well, one of the comments, I think in the email you sent was, it's all right if you haven't finished it by tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Right, yeah,
so
it's with just the two people
Yeah.
to compare, two companies.
Part of it was references too, so we couldn't get from that yet, so.
So, I don't remember, I didn't bring my scores, so.
Yeah, well, I wasn't
John.
sure how the first one was consultant experience in the establishment of public sector building permit application fees to meet the defined scope of work.
That was, I think, a misprint, because you
The
probably.
building permit, we were listening at the exact same time, I'm sorry.
We
Yeah.
have
We're about-
3 RFPs out right now.
That was they were,
That's quite all right, but I'm just saying, that's why I
Yeah.
looked at this and said, I'll figure this out.
yeah,
Just-
I think you just meant experience in this
It
area.
is helpful to have a rubric though, thank you.
Yes.
Please don't feel like you have to fill one of those out. You don't. They're not required.
Yeah, okay.
It's just to help you,
Since I did fill one
You
out, maybe
think-
I'll start the discussion.
there you go.
So first of all, I was impressed by Lisa Hedden's efforts to actually look at our budget.
Oh,
and-
absolutely.
And to also understand the situation with our service from Austin as being the provider of our treatment. And so I got a better impression that she had spent the time to understand our situation as well. And then, of course, the cost is a lot less than her proposal. So I gave her a much higher score based on those two issues. And I guess the issue of boilerplate language came up here, so that was something that seemed to be present in the other proposal.
I suppose also I have the same reaction. The cost differential is large. It's roughly 3 to 1, call it, for the sake of argument. And I was impressed again by Melissa, looking at the fact that actually breaking down our budget and our expenditures in a way that made sense. The one thing I'm a little concerned about is she's a sole practitioner, and that is a little bit of a problem, not a huge problem, but she's got plenty of experience in a large client base. I think it would be a good idea, one recommendation would be to go and look at, or talk to at least 1 or 2 of the references for each of the consultants, and get some feeling from them. It's a little bit like no one ever shows you or sends you a bad reference, but we should still talk to them and see if we can draw some inferences about what working with them was like and how easy it was to get a good presentation from them or a good set of results from them at the end. I'm less impressed by the numerical proprietary model from Wildan. We're a small city. We have 1,500 houses.
500.
500 houses, 1,500 residents, sorry, thank you for correcting me. And,
You're bragging, Clark, we don't got 500.
yeah, thank you. So, I think that carried less weight than what I was looking at.
I look at the sole proprietorship as almost a positive because we'd be more of an important client to this person. She impressed me quite a bit in her presentation, and her proposal is being very clear. They both have experience, doing this. A data point of reasonable fees was what Grady charged us last time, which was $7,000 or $8,000, I want to say. So the 6,000 seemed in line with that, and the 19 seemed relatively out of line. As for Wildan, I know that it's sort of a sole proprietorship or a partnership, but I looked them up on Yelp, and I've never seen a company that only got 1 stars. There's 6 reviews on Yelp, and every one of them is horrible.
For what, though?
For stuff they did in California. So it's not these people, so it's not a good data point, but I just never seen a company that got only 1 star.
Well, I will say that, just for the sake of argument, there is a restaurant in I think it's in Hayward,
Oh yeah,
California.
that pay me to do 1 star.
Yeah, they want you only to provide 1-star
This
reviews.
isn't that.
Yeah.
This is people who are not happy. So, pending reference checks, I would lean more towards Melissa.
I agree. I don't see how you can spend $20,000 on this type of work for this size of a community, given what we spent before on similar type of reports. Yeah, they're a large. Wildan is a larger shop. They probably can handle larger clients. They've built some software that helps them. Frankly, I would think the software would help streamline their process and reduce their hours, but they seem to imply that they need to do a lot more work. I don't know how many hours it takes to do this type of work, whether it's 30 or 120. We can hire her 3 times if she decides that 30 hours isn't enough before we've even hit their limit. So I certainly appreciate the work they do. They obviously are very polished in their presentation, in their materials, and there's an expense that goes along with that. I think that this comes down to experience, and they're both experienced, and so, assuming that those references check out, I would also be supportive of Melissa.
I also want another data point. Because Amber, you will have to work with them very closely. May we have your thoughts?
Sure. I'm impressed with Melissa. I think I like that she is going to keep coming back no matter how many times we ask her to. I think that's important that she's dedicated to getting it right for Rollingwood and not just pounding out spreadsheets. I was also interested in the conversation about strength and how she's going to measure that, because we just got a renewal of we have a discharge permit with the city of Austin, so they make us file a permit with them to discharge into their wastewater treatment plant. And the water attorneys were concerned about how they classified us in our wastewater and felt like it was higher strength than it should be. So if she's going to collect this data, this could also be very helpful in going back to the city of Austin with our current permit and possibly maybe with what they're charging us.
Yeah, and the rates that they
yes.
charge us to start with.
Yes. So, even if they raise any coming up on us, if they reclassified us. So that really resonated with me too.
I'd also like to find a partner that we could use not year after year, but every 2 years or whatever the interval is, that we keep the same folks, and she seemed more in that bucket than the other gentleman. They were both fine, and they both could do a good job. It's just cost is a big factor in my book.
Yes, cost.
Okay. Okay, well, I guess I'm hearing a positive recommendation for Melissa Hedden. So we probably should have a motion that I guess would,
Oh,
Be happy
conditional,
to move that.
I would say conditional though on checking the
yeah,
references.
so the motion would be to recommend Melissa Hedden pending reports from her references that are reasonable and positive.
And then council votes on this?
Correct.
This is
We'll have
just
those
a
prepared.
recommendation.
Right, we'll have
So-
those prepared for council.
Will you be able to, is that, who goes and calls the references? Is that something you do? Is that
Yes.
something, oh, okay, great.
Ashley and I will probably do it together.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And then will you, if there's anything unusual in them, you'll report back to us?
Of
or-
course,
yeah.
yes,
So,
yes. If
okay.
something unusual happens, I probably will bring it back to the utility commission if it's just way out of bounds.
That would surprise us.
Yeah,
Surprise me, but I'm sure.
right.
Okay, well, that seems like what we were all in favor of.
I move to recommend Melissa Hedden, subject to favorable or non-surprising reference checks to city council. Motion.
I would second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for
Thank you.
helping us out there.
Thank you for organizing all that. It's a lot of work.
Okay, so agenda item 6, discussion on member terms, expirations, and intent.
This is an item that we are putting on every board and commission. This is kind of how we've decided to go forward with this. So we just want to get your feedback, whether you wish to continue serving going forward. And then I think Clark, you might be bumping your 6-year term. Would you
I'm
like?
bumping my 9th year.
Okay. You're well into your second 6-year term.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in serving again?
I'll just say that I'm interested in continuing, but I have, there'll be possible periods of, in the spring when I wouldn't be available for meetings.
Okay.
This year, probably April and May.
I don't think that will be a problem.
But, yeah, I will, if I'm needed, but we're already too short on the
Yes.
commission. So that's another activity, I think, to recruit.
Yes, ask your friends and neighbors if they would like to
Okay.
join the commission. We're getting very busy with the rate study and everybody else feel up to serving?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll bring this to council and they'll consider it. And then we'll ask them for a term extension for you, Clark. And
Okay.
Is a quorum based
Really?
on the total number of seats or filled seats?
I need to consult our current attorney. I had gotten 2 different, my interpretation is that it's on total seats. But I had gotten it answered 2 different ways from our former attorney. So it's a question that hasn't come up since. That's how I've been interpreting it, but I can follow up.
No, we need to recruit more people.
Yeah.
Get more different ideas.
That's one downside of having a small community.
Yes. Volunteer fatigue.
Yeah, volunteer pool is small.
Yes, and y'all are volunteering for everything, so.
Okay, so
Okay.
any further discussion?
No.
Okay. All right, then I think we're ready to adjourn. Anybody object?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, aye. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
So do we have minutes to sign from